Hello, I'm Jake Boudreau, civic journalist at Tello Community Television. This week, on The Record, I attended the Committee of the Whole session of Richmond Municipal Council, which took place on April 8th in Arichat. After the meeting, Warden Lois Landry answered my questions. The first presentation was made by Nicole Briand, General Manager of Strait Area Transit, who was asked by District 3 Councillor Brian Marchand about an assistance program for some of its users.
Nicole, on page 6 of your presentation, where you have the fare assistance program,
yes.
Can you say a little more about that? Like the regular fare is $9 one way. So what does that cover? Do they get the full rebate?
So we have an application, and it does change each year. It is through our Rural Transportation Association. So there's different income thresholds that the client would have to fill out the application, and then it comes to myself. And based on their income, we can cover up to 75% of their trips, up to $200 a month is the guideline for that. The threshold this year, I believe, was under $31,000 for a single person, and under, I believe it was $41,000 for a couple. I would anticipate that that will probably change with this new fiscal year.
So when you say up to $200 a month, can they get a monthly pass on that? Or 75% of the monthly pass?
I have done monthly passes, so what I would do would be get them to, pay the $50, and then we would cover the other $150.
Okay.
To allow them to be able to travel all month, yeah.
My last question is the ridership numbers from 23 to 24. Do you have any explanation for that, or are people giving you a reason why they're not using it, or?
So my biggest explanation with that, I would say, Brian, is that in 2023 we did still have a 16-passenger bus that we unfortunately did have to retire in that year. So it's definitely limited the amount of people that we can take at one time. And also that would be up to, I believe, February's numbers. We wouldn't have marches included in that yet because the counts wouldn't be finished yet as we just finished the fiscal year.
Okay, so there could be more than the 4916 then?
Yeah, there would probably be, I would say, roughly ballpark, maybe like an extra 700 or so added, give or take a little bit.
Okay, so it would be pretty close then.
We would be pretty similar, yes.
Okay.
That's great. I think many of us were going to ask that question. So, yeah, that's great. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Go ahead, Councillor Marquette.
Thanks, Warden. So thanks, Nicole. Great presentation. I did want to just also note that from an internal controls perspective, it wasn't really covered in the public portion of this presentation, but there's been a lot of work done on internal policy development, financial controls tightening. We're working with an auditor as well as a bookkeeper to make sure that the information we're providing to councils is spot on. I also want to mention that the fleet renewal that Nicole touched on would not be possible without those tightening of controls, tightening of policies, and the support of both the provincial and federal government at times. So kudos, Nicole, to you on your work for that. One of the things we've recently introduced, taking a lesson from our budgeting process, is a bit of a capital plan for the fleet and our property and equipment, that type of thing. So we've got now that type of process in place where the board can clearly see what's coming up, and hopefully that will help us prevent future situations where she just described to you, Councillor Marchand, where we had to retire a bus. It resulted in a reduction in traffic. What we want to be able to do is more proactively plan for that kind of thing, and those practices I think will help. So, thanks, Nicole.
What I didn't hear is a question about our contribution in this fiscal year. You did make reference to our previous contribution. Is that something you feel, should that be where we land? Is that something that your group can manage? Has Has there been conversations about that at this point?
We haven't had a conversation yet as a board. I'm just kind of getting into doing our budget
Okay.
As the fiscal year just ended. But I would say that would probably be a good figure to ask.
So we'll wait to hear from you via letter or something else around thoughts around that.
How vital is the assistance program being offered to Strait Area Transit users? I know it was called there was some kind of term for it, fair assistance or something like that, but I assume it's quite needed in this area.
Yeah, it was great to hear that as part of the presentation, and Councillor Marchand certainly highlighted it as something that we got a little bit more information from her about. So, you know, if you are under a certain income threshold, there is an opportunity for reduced fare, not only individual fares, but can be monthly passes. And so I think there were some things we weren't aware of, that being one of them, but also if you are an adult who has considerable needs and you need a caregiver to accompany you, that caregiver doesn't have to pay as part of the ride costs. So really great to get, that's one of the advantages to having groups come and speak to us, is that you get to sort of dig a little bit deeper into things that maybe you had built some assumptions on, but it was a really interesting presentation.
In the next presentation, Celeste Gotel, Community Outreach Coordinator for the Seniors Take Action Coalition, noted that 46% of Richmond County residents are aged 55 and older. Later in the presentation, Seniors Take Action Coalition Chair Dorothy Barnard outlined the financial situation of the organization.
The reality is that we're right now financially robbing Peter to pay Paul. And the argument really is what we would give you for the amount of financial support that we have asked for is really quite significant. And having a somewhat secure foundation to actually hire somebody to support the organization then would free us to be able to plan into the future and also move more towards other things that we can look into in different ways. And so the other piece of all of this is, for example, the Acting Collectively report, what I read out of that is really people in Richmond County aren't really wanting to use the resources that they're not familiar with. They'd much prefer to use resources that they, like, either they know or they have some knowledge of from somebody else, or they know it's local. And so those are things that we can actually help to more formally identify and then come up with a suggestion about how it might work. And I think it would be tailored to the people that are here, not really like a lot of the resources were online or outside of Richmond County. So I think that's definitely an area that we can have a significant impact on. And the other is, so I think you're also being asked for money from raising the villages, for example, and so we do have connections with them as well, and one of the projects they're looking at is community hubs. So far their community hubs have been centered around buildings, but what we're suggesting is for Richmond County, the Center Without Walls is a better model or a better fit for here. So use the infrastructure that we already have in place, but start supporting more of the seniors clubs and the community organizations that have buildings that allow people to go and get services or enjoy the programs that they can apply. And so those are things that we can, like, we have a different viewpoint. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes to make any decisions about the money, but I do think that we're really a bargain.
Yeah, and the other thing is that we very much focus on all the social determinants of health at all the work that we do. So I think we have the ability to kind of see it through that lens, which I think is critically important to healthy outcomes and to really improve the overall health and wellness of a community.
Thank you very much. We don't include questions in the 15 minutes, so we still have a little bit of time. So I want to thank you very much for your presentation and also for the thoroughness of the information included in the letter that was attached to the presentation, which is available to us. So I'll throw it out to any councillors. Councillor Membercat?
Thanks, Warden, and thanks, Celeste and Dorothy, for your presentation this evening. I would say, first off, don't underestimate your level of influence on the Voluntary Vulnerable Persons Registry, because that came directly from your team. So thank you for suggesting that, and that would have started with the previous council to the one that's here now. We never would have launched on that path without Seniors Take Action, nor that section on our website. So, you know, don't undersell yourself. But I guess what I'm wondering is, you know, as you kind of look out onto the next year and you're seeking some, particular funding for some particular activities, do you see, you mentioned Raising the Villages, like, do you see a partnership there with them potentially? Or do you, I guess I'm just wondering, like, how could that work be best supported? What you've asked for is in the scheme of a municipal budget, is a fairly small amount of money, but there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of seniors groups to support. So just want to hear a little bit about how you see that kind of rolling out a bit.
I sit on the board of the Raising the Villages, so that's one connection, but I think the other piece of that is really, Celeste has done a lot of work on the concept of a senior center without walls. And so the partnership would be they're seeking money to do pilots in different areas, including Richmond County. We would work with them because we have a model that's under development, it's not completely developed, but that is an idea that then they can examine to achieve the same things that they're trying to achieve with their structure-based.
I also wanted to mention that I've been involved in discussions with them, particularly around intergenerational programming as well as Cape Breton Family Resource Place. So these are two partnerships that we will be exploring around intergenerational programming. I also wanted to mention that we have 6 funding applications in the queue, with our fingers crossed, hoping that they will provide us with funding, but that's all project program funding. It's not operating funding. So it's all well and good to apply for program funding to deliver programs, and hopefully we'll be successful. Some of those are programs that are much needed in Richmond County, including intergenerational programming. But what you need is that kind of funding that provides the oversight and allows the organization to be able to focus on creating an organization as well and building capacity in that regard. So.
And the other thing I was supposed to say is that your previous Seniors Council has merged with Seniors Take Action Coalition. So at the moment, we represent both very effectively.
Anyone else have any questions? Councillor Sampson?
Yeah, not so much as a question, but as a thank you to your group for everything you do. I think if there's ever a prime example of a return on investment, your group is that example for sure. So everything that you do for our county and the seniors in our county is great. It's hard, like you say, when you talk these numbers, Celeste, 46% of seniors, of people in Richmond County are 55 and over, and 32% are 65 and over, and 38% of those are living in low-income situations. the work that you guys do is extraordinary and appreciated by, I can say, everybody around this table. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sampson. Councillor Marchand, do I see your finger?
You mentioned about transportation issues and social isolation. Are the events that you put on, is that being used at all, or are you guys aware of this dial ride? Is it not working for you guys, or?
We are aware, very aware of it. We have made it available for some of our events. There's not been much of an uptake. We have particular needs within Richmond County of people who are very isolated due to mobility issues, but the mobility support that they can provide doesn't get them to, like, some of these people need personal caregivers to come as well. So it's not proven to be as successful as we would like to get people to events. However, I just recently heard that they're providing free transportation to Cora. So I was curious about whether or not we could kind of strike a similar deal so that we could get some of our folks, because $18 is cost prohibitive for some people to actually attend an event.
But for people that need someone with them, those people are transported for free, the personal caregivers. Yeah. And then there's the assistance program as well that may help. So maybe you can look at that.
Yeah, so we're going to throw it out to councillors. Councillor
Yeah. Thank you, Warden. So I'd like to make a motion to defer the financial request for support from the Seniors Take Action Coalition to our budgeting process.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor, okay. Everybody wants to second it. So I have Councillor Sampson. I saw your fingers up first. So moved by Councillor Mumbercat, seconded by Councillor Sampson to defer the request for funding to budget deliberations. Any discussion on that matter? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried.
Now, the Seniors Take Action Coalition, I believe they're asking for $33,870 from council. I was looking at the package. I think it was
Right, yeah.
like for in-kind would be part of that as well. So I assume you guys are going to be able to fulfill that need?
So we have a budget deliberation process that we certainly go through with an open mind. And so we try not to say for sure we're going to, give to this, that, or the other thing. But I think what their presentation certainly spoke to was the importance of operational funding, so that they have people who they can pay on either contract or part-time salary, whatever the case may be, to actually apply for the grants to do so much more programming. And what they said is really true. It's groups like this, whether it's Senior Take Action Coalition or the SAT, it's groups like this that do the work that council needs to see done, whether it's for our seniors groups or for other folks with who are disadvantaged in some other way. Certainly, we saw Councillor Mumbercat gave them a shout out about the voluntary vulnerable person registry and the advocacy that they have done on that. The shingles vaccine came out. They've been advocating that for a long time. Sometimes their voice is heard loud and clear here in council chambers. Sometimes they're one of many voices that appeal to federal and provincial governments, but it's an important group that does work that needs both operational funding and grant funding.
Under new business, council reviewed a staff briefing note about the Nova Scotia Community Solar Program, which is considering 2 sites in Richmond County, one near Kempt Road, the other off Whiteside Road.
The request is for council to send a letter of support to the Minister of Energy for the proposed community solar projects, which then trigger a whole series of other steps, which include community consultation and so on. So I'll throw it out for discussion.
When you're saying the proposed, we don't have a proposal yet, right? Would they not come and ask us before they can move it forward for a letter of support?
Madam Chair, I asked the same thing. They come to you after they do their community engagement. They like to do the community engagement first, so they're looking for the letter of support first, and then they're going to come back and see council afterwards. It is. You know, there's nothing committal with the letter of support. And as the warden said, there's many other steps after this. This is just, in theory, we're interested in pursuing this project in our county. So.
That would be both of them.
That'd be both of them. It's the same proponent.
Trying to get to the right. So yeah, so it on page 66 of your package, which is page 15 of theirs, they talk about the community engagement with municipal support. So then they have other steps, but I think they'd like to go into community engagement with some, you know, sense that the municipality is supportive.
Madam Chair, if I may say
Go
one
ahead.
more thing. I think I throw a wrinkle in theirs as well. As I said, I wanted them to come to council, at least would give me something to go to council before you go to the public. So I threw a bit of a wrinkle at them. It's just I didn't want anybody going out and having community sessions without us having knowledge of it first.
On page 15, it just says some of the things they've done, and then on page 16, municipal support is the second thing after the community engagement. So they haven't done any community engagement. There was one of the sessions, I believe, that was virtual in that list of their engagement, the second one. So they haven't done any, right? The first or second or third?
To my knowledge.
Okay.
I actually gave them sites to go have their engagement at for the communities that they're looking at. Like I said, these are community halls you can rent. These are the people you need to talk to and go set them up. So they've done nothing to date at this point.
Do you have a plan?
They do.
I think it is a letter of intent, maybe from the minister, or a letter of interest from the municipality, as opposed to a letter of support necessarily, because I don't think there's any point in encouraging the provincial government or, you know, any group to come in and do community engagement when we have no intention of putting our support behind a project. I think it would be a lot of wasted effort. So maybe it's just in the wording that it would be a letter of interest.
We took that wording from the two letters that were examples that are listed as letters of support. But I think it's semantics, but in essence, you are supportive of their path forward to see what kind of interest they get in the community.
Madam Chair, if I may say, if council would feel more comfortable, we could, at least now it's in front of you and it's here, they can go do their engagement, and the letter of support could come after they start their engagement so that you have time to get any feedback from the community, if you would prefer that. I'm sure that that would be fine with them. They just need this letter as part of their project. So whether they get it now or they get it in 2 weeks' time or 4 weeks' time, it's whatever your comfort level is.
I guess the whole thing of having the engagement is to find out if the public is okay with this. They kind of want the letter up front of support, and I'm not against supporting it. I think it's an okay project, but is the procedure, the steps outlined by the provincial government or the Department of Energy, that they would have to do consults, community consults first before coming for letters of support?
I'm unsure.
Okay. So our motion is just to provide a letter of support or an intent of support? I think we should, if we're supporting it, just go ahead and give them a letter of support.
Sorry, I cut you off on the microphone there. Sorry, unintentional, but I will say that the motion is to recommend that we send a letter of support to the Minister of Energy for the proposed community solar project. So I think we can send a letter of support that we are supportive of this process as it unfolds. And then, you know, should community engagement result in outrage, we certainly are free to change our you know, position on that. We can write back. So I don't think there's anything wrong with you know, the way things are unfolding here.
Okay. Do you want to put anything about conditional? A letter of support is conditional on, or just not bother?
I'm happy to write a letter saying we are supportive of this process and watching it unfold. And if we, and if something comes up in community consultations to the contrary, we can address that in another letter if we need to. So all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Now, what does the Nova Scotia Community Solar Program entail? I know you get correspondence, I believe it's from Cape Breton Regional Municipality. Does this pertain to Richmond County in any way? Is there any connection?
Yeah, very much so. So there is a developer who's looking at solar projects here in Richmond County. 2 projects, but 1 developer. So probably different PID numbers, not necessarily, may not feel like 2 completely different projects. But, solar is one of the ways that we meet our renewable energy goals in Nova Scotia. We have some land in places that, may not be used for, maybe it's close to the highway or something along those lines. So if we have a developer who's interested in going out and having public engagements. So what our letter is to provide support for those next steps, which include public engagement sessions. So they don't have dates set, but they have 2 plans for 2 in-person sessions and 1 virtual. And part of the reason why I came to council is because anybody who's interested can go to the Committee of the Whole package for tonight, April 8th. And if you go, far enough down, you'll see the information that they're providing. So people who are curious about what solar might look like for residents, it's a really interesting way to have to kind of sign on to be involved in a solar project. So we're happy to support the next phase of that, which is going out to the community and seeing what they have to say.
Next, Council discussed the Richmond County Community Profile Report from the Acting Collectively Core Research Team.
Report is attached, no doubt really good information for groups applying for funding, and many thanks to the Senior Take Action Coalition for their support in that. The numbers of Richmond representatives, Richmond County voices that were heard in that are certainly significant. The motion that is being requested is that we accept the Acting Collectively Project Richmond County Community Profile as presented so that we can make it available on our website. Moved by Councillor Mumbercat, seconded by Councillor Marchand. Is there any discussion on that motion? Go ahead, Councillor.
Thanks, Warden. I just wanted to also thank the Dr. Kingston Memorial Health Centre because they were very instrumental in providing supports for this, as well as Seniors Take Action Coalition. Just a great job done by all. And I think Dorothy raised a good point that, it does highlight a situation where many seniors in our community are comfortable taking advantage of the services that they know about. It's, but something new coming down the pipe is often off their radar, and maybe some discomfort in attaching to those services. So it's really great information that hopefully we can see community groups use to create better outcomes for health and social outcomes for our seniors population.
Yeah, I really thought the information related to what 211 has on their site versus what they don't, and where people feel comfortable, was really, really telling, and I think really will help inform groups as they move forward. I'm sorry, did I cut you off, councillors? No. Okay.
Yeah, so for me, looking at page 7 of the document, it states that most of the people that participated at the bottom, Warden, on the notes, way at the bottom, it just states that most of the participants that took part of it were healthy, well-educated, and independent residents, and not as much as vulnerable residents. That to me is a little concerning, and when it comes to some of the recommendations I see here in the document, I'd like to see, again, for me, when it comes to engagement, if people are not going to come to you, how do we get to them? You know what I mean? So I'd like to see us try to see what we can do when it comes to the vulnerable residents in our county, right? To see if they can, if we can include them or get some kind of info that better details and includes these people, right? So thank you.
Yeah, very good point. Any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of recommending to council to to accept the acting collectively project Richmond County Community Profile as presented, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries.
Okay, what stands out to you about the Richmond County Community Profile report that came up?
Yeah, a couple things. First off, kudos to the Senior Take Action Coalition, because I believe they were behind trying to entice seniors to answer surveys. So we had 100 people, 102, I believe, but there were only slightly more than 200 in Cape Breton. I think it's Antigonish, Victoria, and Richmond. So, we're punching above our weight there for sure. What concerns me a little bit is that there was some reference to the most vulnerable seniors weren't included in that 102, so that's a concern. But I think the folks who were there and involved in that survey certainly spoke to the fact that if seniors in particular aren't familiar with the service, they're less likely to access it. So how do we connect seniors in their communities with services that they will feel comfortable accessing? We saw, Peggy McNeil, our volunteer of the month, is called the community nurse. Why? Because people know her, she lives there. So people are really open to reaching out to folks when they know that service, but when they don't, we've got services that are available but aren't being accessed. So there's a whole bunch of really involved, really interesting components to that study that I think will help inform decision-making going forward.
Municipal staff provided council with a briefing note on its applications to the Provincial Capital Assistance Program for 2 projects. The first is the construction and demolition debris landfill expansion, which is estimated at around $287,000. The second entails upgrades to the Arichat water treatment plant and water tower, which is estimated at around $200,000.
And so they're looking for a motion, and I did clarify they actually are fine with one motion. That Committee of the Whole recommend to Council to support the applications to the province's Provincial Capital Assistance Program, PCAP, for the Arichat Water System Upgrade Project and the Construction and Demolition Debris Landfill Expansion Engineering Project. So that's the motion looking for. Moved by Councillor Mumbercat, seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson. So any questions on that motion? Go ahead, comment.
Just in case anybody picked it up, the PLC listed in that is a programmable logic controller, so that's the brain, right? So there you go. It's just the logic board for controlling things.
Any other comments, questions, concerns, queries? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
There are 2 projects, and it was certainly an easy breezy motion, right? Because we were asked to support them writing proposals to get money from outside the municipality. But there is certainly work that needs to be done. And so this motion of council was to allow the Public Works Department, through its director, to apply for funding through. There is no question that in probably most of Nova Scotia, municipalities are struggling with aging infrastructure. And so we're no different, particularly on the Alma Dam side of that. So the dollars sometimes feel insurmountable when you look at our municipal budget, but this is really an opportunity for us to try to leverage funds federally and provincially. In this case, it's provincial funding.
And it's a badly needed project. It's been on the docket for some time, and
Badly
the
needed
water
project.
system needs work.
Yeah, and I think it stunts our growth too. We are struggling to look at extending our municipal infrastructure, water and sewer, to places that don't have it, where developers may very well be able to start building some affordable housing. We've heard that from developers. The struggle is that our system just can't sustain that, and we have to fix what we have as opposed to expand. So it is important, and I think you'll see more conversations about that moving forward.
Finally, Council debated a motion from District 4 Councillor Amanda Mumbercat about the non-resident deed transfer tax increase, with Warden Lois Landry voting against the motion.
I did put a memo together, and you know, I think now that it's been introduced into committee of the whole, it can be part of the public package potentially for our regular meeting when it comes to council. So for members of the public who haven't seen it, they will get a chance to see it in the future. But basically, it's a memo that discusses the provincial deed transfer tax, which now applies to all residential properties or portion of property deemed residential with 3 dwelling units or less, including vacant land that is considered to be residential. The transfer tax is a 5% tax levied on the purchase price of the assessed value of the property, but effective as of April 1st, that rate for non-residents has increased from 5% to 10% through a change implemented by the provincial government. So that change affects all of the purchase and sale agreements signed after March 31st and any other transfers that happen after March 31st without an agreement in purchase sale. So some of the potential negative impacts, and I've discussed with some realtors as well as some sort of property managers in the county, they've talked about concerns that this is going to result in a decline in real estate investment because non-residents will be less likely to invest here in Nova Scotia and potentially leading to slower market activity. They've discussed, you know, potential for stalling residential development because there will be higher upfront costs, so potential buyers may choose not to invest, which sort of contradicts our goal of addressing the housing shortage. They outlined some concerns specifically around property transfers within families. So a lot of times we've got family homes here, cottages. If a person here wants to transfer that to a family member outside of Nova Scotia, those family members will get hit with a 10% transfer tax as well, which I think many people were unaware of, and I think sort of flies in the face of our desire to attract people back home and increase Nova Scotia's population in general. Some concerns were expressed around job losses and economic decline, specifically for, you know, like contractors who would potentially lose businesses, you know, impact to skilled tradespeople and suppliers, everyone from septic installers to well drillers to you name it. You know, and I know that our rural economies do partially depend on new home construction to stay viable, and that certainly is evidenced by some of the statistics on, you know, permit applications and issuance that we receive from EDPC on an annual basis. You know, there's obviously, you know, the glaring piece there is what maybe, you know, will be perceived by an unfair double standard between property types and types of property owners. So, you know, resident versus non-resident, also resource assessed land remaining taxed at only 1.5%, allowing large non-resident landowners to continue buying up massive tracts of land with minimal burden. You know, it talks about, you know, discouraging the very type of investment that creates housing, because non-residents, you know, buying those smaller build-ready lots will be penalized with the 10% tax. Talked a little bit about economic impact, that, you know, non-resident buyers don't just purchase land, they purchase, you know, groceries here, and they employ our tradespeople and materials, and, you know, that means fewer people will be spending money in our province, and how that could potentially lead to just an overall reduction in investment, because it will impact investor confidence in our province in general. And of course, sending a negative message about Nova Scotia's business climates, you know, saying that we are not investment ready. That, you know, that non-resident tax will definitely throw some cold water on Nova Scotia's reputation for treating newcomers and investors in a fair manner. And of course, concerns about unpredictable government policies for people who are, especially those who are in mid-sale or mid-purchase of negotiation of agreements, that type of thing. So all that being said, and I've got these outlined in 6 lovely bullets that, you know, hopefully we'll, like I said, we'll see in the next package, but I am asking council to consider a recommendation to send a letter to Premier Tim Houston outlining these concerns and to encourage a reconsideration of the policy change, and or to consider at least making the change apply only to properties with existing dwellings, not land that could be developed into homes. Because that, you know, that specifically could potentially, you know, again, you know, contradict our desire to create more housing here in the county. So I'll leave it for discussion, and I want to thank the folks who provided information to all of the folks I talked to help me put this message together in a way that was coherent. So it's a lot.
So we have a motion on the floor, and looking for a seconder to spur on some discussion. Seconded by Deputy Warden Sampson. Anyone have any, start off?
What we're dealing with now, non-resident, and they're talking out of province, if I understand correctly, would there be any consideration to, you know, saying we're okay with out of country? Because maybe that's more what they're concerned about, is speculative buying from out of country and so on. And I think as far as even family coming back, to be a lot, there's still going to be instances of it, but a lot less so with out of country purchases.
I would like to say that there are some advantages to this tax, and particularly, first off, it isn't really non-residents, it's non-residents and people who don't intend to become residents within 6 months. So if you're purchasing a home and you live out of province, but you can commit to living here within 6 months, that doesn't apply to you. So there is that. But one of the things that I heard on the doorsteps again and again was that local people were being priced out of the market. And part of that is because we have people from out of province. So take our tax sales, for example. Part of the purpose of this is to give local people a chance to purchase property, houses and land at a slightly reduced rate. So at our tax sales, for example, if something goes up for sale, it will cost somebody who doesn't intend to move here within 6 months. It will mean that they have to pay 5% more. So there's already a 5% tax on everybody, and it's a 5% additional. And so I believe that public policy should be nimble enough to deal with the context of the day. And I actually would be really in support of this, or would have been in support of this 5 years ago when our property values were low. But one of the things that increased property values does is it increases our property assessments. And I don't think there was a time on the doorsteps that I didn't hear people concerned about our property assessments going up because the price of property has gone on. So I would like to see a time where we are less concerned about this, or we are worried about property values. That may be 5 years from now, but at this point, our skilled trades people, we have a shortage, and we have a shortage. The construction folks have talked about a shortage coming. So I think that I have, and there are, when it comes to estate planning for families who own cottages, it doesn't apply if you leave it to them in your will after you pass. So there are opportunities for people to engage with estate planning. But I personally think that the enhanced opportunity for local buyers at this point, where people have identified that they feel like they're being priced out of the market, is something that is important at this point. It does provide, they're estimating, I think I saw $12 million in revenue for Nova Scotia. That's not my driving concern. I think my driving concern is that we are seeing locals who are feeling like they're struggling, and this manages to give them a leg up. So I'm not in support of this motion.
So I would agree with you on, looking for policy that is nimble, and that's why I kind of added consider maybe making the change to properties with existing dwellings, that type of thing. I feel like the intent behind this legislation, behind this policy, was good and right time, right? At the right place at the right time. But in my opinion, because of some of the concerns that have been raised by people who are investing now in property developments, it's a bit too broad a brush. It's not quite nimble enough. And I think that's why I'm suggesting I'd like to see maybe some exceptions around family, some exceptions around vacant land, that type of thing. So, I definitely take your points, but I think it was just maybe a little bit less nimble than what it could have been. And I think there will be some unintended consequences as a result of that. So that's kind of where the caveat came in the motion that I presented. So
there are exceptions listed there. And as you state, if the deed is, for a grantor, if they pass away, you can do it in your will, but one exception is the deed has to be registered after the grantor passes away. I agree with Councillor Arichat. The issue with family transactions, I don't see something very clear with the exceptions. And there's many seniors that want to put the name of their child on the deed. So I'll definitely be supporting that there needs to be some changes. I know what the intent of it was, maybe keep property values down, and I did hear it as well from many people that they were being, the children of these people are being priced out. There is exemptions for like vacant land, but I think it kind of states commercial or resource. So if there's any part of it that's residential, so is it the zoning that has to be residential, or any piece of land can be whatever. Whatever the DPC zoning would be, probably. If it's a commercial zone, they're probably looking for R1, R2 zones as being non-taxable, or taxable, And I agree that if it's, but if it's a vacant piece of land and there's no tax on that, well, people are going to start arguing, well, if I want to buy a house as well. So the intent of this was to try to keep pricing down, but it's a tough thing. And what's in here for people that want to put the name of their child on their properties and having to pay a tax, even the deed transfer tax, I think that shouldn't even be there for people that just want to put their children's name on it for being out of province. So I'll be supporting this.
Yeah, and I guess I acknowledge that, to your point about the unintended consequences around family. Anybody who has had a family member who has, intended to leave, a property to their children, there are many, many, many intricacies to that. And there's capital gains, and there's a whole lot of challenges around that. And I certainly don't disagree with that element of it, but I still feel that the vacant pieces of land, if we're concerned about the housing market, what we're saying is that we want people from out of province who don't intend to live here full time to not have, to have same sort of access to that or not have to pay any more. I think the point of it is, if there is even a 5% change or reduction for local people who want to build on there and live there full time. So that it's that piece that I'm not supportive of. I don't disagree with the family concerns. And to your point about the 5% and the 10%, the in and out, of province. Go ahead.
But for those of us that have children, or those of anybody that has children that are away, wanting to buy a piece of land, how do you resolve that? How do you put that exception in there? Do the children have to get their parents that are living in this province to purchase the land? So it's an extra transaction that's costly, because there may be children that want to come back that are out west and decide, I'm going to buy a piece of land and I want to come back, but I'm not living here in 6 months. So for those, they're an out of province resident, but they're planning on moving back home, when they retire or in a few years. So I just think, I know what the intent of it was, but the exceptions, and I'm not one for putting a bunch of exceptions, but I definitely think the whole family thing, because for myself, it's definitely right now an issue for us.
I think I'd like to make a motion just to add in about that out of country be considered instead of out of province. And that doesn't mean in the letter being written that we're stating this has to be the way to go, just that could be something to be given thought to, rather than out of province, that out of country. So I'd like to make that motion if there's a seconder. And an amendment to the original motion, that another consideration be whether or not out of country rather than out of province, maybe.
I wonder if we could actually ask for a motion to amend that clarifies, that may add a point that somebody wants to add, but also maybe tightens up the motion, because I'm not sure if the and/or refers to what we want the Premier to do or what we want our letter to say. So is there an appetite to amend once or twice to add a thought about foreign ownership being out of country, and perhaps revisiting the original motion? I'm just worried about the and/or in a motion.
I think my intent would just be to add consideration to out of country rather than out of province.
Could it be that outlining some of these concerns and encouraging reconsideration of making the change apply to out of country. Do you know what I mean? Like, just to remove the and or. Sorry, Shelley. I will write it down. I don't know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To capture your point, but to clarify it a bit.
Yeah, I think I was just looking to add that as a consideration.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on one. I don't feel like we have to tell them that A, B, or like I'm gonna put this, A, B, or C has to be done. It's just here's A, B, and C as concerns. Would you be willing to consider these? You know, they may come back to us with one of them that they think is valid and the others they don't think is. But I think I was just trying to add that as a possible consideration, but I may have made it more popular than that.
So the motion on the floor to amend is strictly to add consideration out of country rather than out of province. Do we have a seconder on that motion? Seconded by Councillor Marchand. So is there any discussion on that amendment? Okay, all those in favor of that amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. No, sorry, motion carried with 1 nay.
Who's the name?
Me.
Okay,
Yes. And so are there any other amendments to the motion? So what we have is the motion as outlined on Councillor Memberket's memo to us, with now the addition of considering out of country. Is there any other? Okay, so Councillor Marchand, you want to?
I'd like to move another amendment, and the amendment would be to consider family transactions as an exemption. Be it for,
Exactly as is, comma, and consider family transactions.
yeah, for land or transfers.
As an exemption.
Yeah, in the list of exemptions.
Do we have a seconder on that? Seconded by Councillor Sampson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Contrary-minded? Nay. Those, okay. So now we have the original motion plus adding consideration out of province plus an additional exemption for family transfers and sale.
Was there a nay on the family?
There was. Yes. So are there any other comments, concerns, queries, debate, amendments? So we have the original motion plus adding consideration for out of country plus adding an exemption. Okay, all those in favor of that doubly amended motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Nay.
Now, in the case of the increase to the non-resident deed transfer tax, you seem to favor it being exempted for those who might be out of province but are looking at moving here permanently. You'd be more in favor of that.
Sure. So folks can, watch the council discussion. I was the dissenting voice, but that's done. And so what council decided was that we would write to the Premier and ask for consideration on a number of issues. One of the issues was, how the non-resident property tax, deed transfer tax increase for non-residents. And to be clear, it's not non-residents, it's non-residents and people who don't become residents within 6 months. So if you buy something here and it takes you a few months to get yourself here, you're exempt. That doesn't apply to you. But how that impacted families who have as a house or a cottage, and how what that means for you, for you to be able to sign that over to your family members and so on. So just asking for consideration about maybe unintended impact of that legislation.
Yeah, there seem to be some questions about if you had a family member who lives away, but you wanted to give them or sell them land, there would be some complications with that. And with a lot of people here who do have family that are away or at a province, that would kind of make some complications.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And so it's an additional fee for somebody like that. But I guess my argument at council, which was unsuccessful, is that, that really does involve holding a piece of land for somebody who's not living here and not going to develop on it. I think the point of the legislation is to say to people who are living here and people who want to live here, here is a way for you to get a little bit ahead of that. But I think that one thing that is sometimes happens with new legislation is that there are unintended consequences. So council as a group decided to just ask the provincial government to, and I should say also advocacy through the Nova Scotia Federation of Municipalities, to just reflect on that a little bit.
Thank you for watching. Please tune in again to find out what we will be talking about on The Record.